The world didn't see it coming. Silicon Valley didn't either. Elon Musk didn't either, a man who thought the future was his playground. And yet, in the dusty deserts of the Sahel, the future speaks a different language. Not English, not French. It speaks in the rhythm of hammers hitting metal in Ouagadougou, where a young soldier turned statesman stands before his people and before history. It's an August morning in 2025. No orchestra, no holograms, no billion-dollar stage, just sunlight, the hum of generators, and thousands of breathless people. From a country long left on the edge of the world map, a sound rings out, sharp enough to pierce centuries of silence. His name, Ibrahim Traoré. His message: we build because we have to, not because we have money. That day, he didn't reveal luxury. He revealed survival had become a science. 3 inventions, 3 declarations, 3 sparks that could light a continent. First, a compact saltwater to freshwater system that fits on a truck, powerful enough to bring life to millions in a land where thirst kills more people than bullets. Second, Africa's first electric military truck, built in secret workshops by engineers who believe that independence must run on its own wheels. And third, an agricultural drone, its eyes on the land, its hands holding seeds, guiding farmers to bountiful harvests that can overcome drought and overcome despair. Each invention, a story. Every story, a rebellion. Every rebellion, a seed sown in the dry soil of a continent tired of being underestimated. What is this if not audacity? A country with a GDP of less than 20 billion daring to enter industries worth hundreds of billions. While Wall Street calculates risk, Burkina Faso demonstrates determination. While analysts debate feasibility, African engineers turn necessity into invention. While others build empires from profit, these men and women build dignity from dust. No, this is not just an announcement. It is a declaration written not in ink, but in courage. Broadcast not from New York or Paris, but from the Sahel, where the air seems to sparkle with utopia. Around the world, algorithms stop, newsrooms froze. A question spread through internet cables and corridors of power. How did they do it? And perhaps more worryingly, what if this is just the beginning? Because on that August morning in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso revealed more than just machines. It revealed a mindset, a rebellion against subordination, a hymn to a continent finding its voice again. If this story touches your heart, don't just watch, witness. Because this is not a headline, it is a hinge in history. A moment when Africa stopped waiting for permission and began to build its own dawn. It means more than numbers. It keeps the story alive. Yet, the paradox deepens. How can a country without car plants, without sprawling laboratories, without billion-dollar research funds create what even advanced economies struggle to achieve? The answer, as Traore tells it, is disarmingly simple. We build because we must, not because we have money. Out of necessity is born resilience. Out of scarcity, sovereignty. So the question that trembles in boardrooms and classrooms alike is this: are we witnessing the birth of Africa's Silicon Valley? Not in California, not in Europe, but in the heart of the Sahel. And if that is true, how will the rest of the world respond? The inventions are astonishing, but what they symbolize may prove even more revolutionary. August 2025 will not be remembered for the markets of New York or the speeches of Brussels. It will be remembered for a podium in Ouagadougou where a soldier turned statesman declared that invention was now the language of independence. Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, did not speak with the polished cadence of Western CEOs. His stone was sharper, born of dust roads and calloused hands. He presented not a PowerPoint deck, but prototypes. 3 machines, simple in form, extraordinary in meaning. The timeline was precise. Months of preparation and workshops scattered across the country had converged into one morning. Behind closed doors, small teams of engineers, students, and military technicians had labored, often without international patents, without foreign funding, without the glow of global media. Their resources were limited, but their determination was unmeasured. That morning, their work was lifted from anonymity to history. The first invention stood not as gleaming hardware, but as a humble salvation, a salt-to-freshwater system. Compact, efficient, able to function with minimal energy input. It promised clean drinking water in the Sahel, where thirst is not an inconvenience, but a shadow of death. More than 400 million Africans leave without reliable access to safe water. For them, This system is not luxury, it is reprieve. Local health reports suggest that even small-scale trials cut hospital admissions for waterborne disease by nearly a fifth. A figure that may appear small in reports, but in villages means children in classrooms rather than beds of fever. The second invention rolled onto the stage. Wheels coated in dust, body humming with electric power. Africa's first electric military truck. Built not for parades, not for export expose, but for rugged terrain where diesel is scarce and dependence on imported fuel chains is a strategic weakness. Silent in motion, resilient in design, this machine embodies more than tactical advantage. It represents sovereignty made mobile. Analysts predict the global defense electrification could exceed $70 billion by the end of this decade. Yet here, in a nation dismissed as marginal, the prototype was already alive. An army freed from imported fuel is an army freer from foreign leverage. The third hovered in the air, wings bowsing softly, its presence more poetic than mechanical. A drone, yet more than that. A real-time agricultural ally capable of planting seeds, mapping soil moisture, and guiding farmers with precision. For a continent where agriculture remains the livelihood of 60% of the population, this was no mere gadget. In pilot fields, yields rose by nearly a quarter. A shift that means not numbers on spreadsheets, but granaries filled, markets supplied, and families fed. If scaled across regions, such drones could turn recurring famine into reliable harvest. Not through charity, not through aid shipments, through ingenuity taken separately, these machines could be dismissed as curiosities. Together, they form a narrative, necessity reborn as invention, scarcity turned into seed. They are metaphors forged in metal and circuit boards. Water for the thirsty, power for the sovereign, seed for the hungry, soil, seed harvest, the oldest cycle of humanity now reimagined by hands in Ouagadougou. The announcement was not accompanied by corporate sponsors or venture capitalists. It was framed as something deeper, a philosophy. We build because we must. Traoré's words were simple, almost austere, but within them lay a challenge to centuries of dependency. For decades, Africa was told it must wait for technology to arrive by container ship, often at inflated prices tethered to conditional aid packages. Yet, at this moment, Burkina Faso declared otherwise. Technology would not trickle from the north. It would rise from African soil itself. Numbers, of course, draw attention. A country with a gross domestic product of less than $20 billion now stands in industries worth hundreds of billions. Water technology, defense mobility, agri sectors dominated by giants suddenly shaken by a whisper from the Sahel. Financial analysts already speak of potential disruption. If other African nations follow, what becomes of global supply chains? What happens when Africa is no longer only a consumer, but a creator? When the continent, long branded as dependent, begins exporting not only raw materials but finished ideas, beyond economics lies symbolism. For a young student in Bobolu Lasso, watching a drone scatter seeds across dry earth is not just about agriculture, it is about possibility. For a soldier, climbing into an electric truck is not merely logistics, it is dignity. For a family drawing clean water in a remote village, desalination is not chemistry, it is sovereignty in liquid form. Each invention becomes both tool and metaphor. Each machine, both product and proclamation, and yet questions linger. How sustainable are these prototypes? Can a small nation shoulder the costs of scaling production, of training, of maintenance? Can it withstand the skepticism of global media, the resistance of vested interests? Those are questions for another chapter. For now, what matters is that something has begun. A cycle long suppressed by neo-colonial economics has cracked open. The soil is broken, the seed has been sown, whether the harvest comes depends on what follows. The inventions have been revealed, but the storm of the reaction silent in Western capitals, thunderous across African cities, is only beginning. The unveiling of 3 inventions could have been treated as technical news. Yet in Ouagadougou it was carried as something far greater, a proclamation. President Ibrahim Traoré did not simply present machines. He declared the end of an era. Standing before his people, he spoke words that cut sharper than statistics. The age of dependency is finished. We build because we must, not because we have money. With those sentences, a ripple turned into a wave. For decades, Africa had been spoken of as a continent waiting for permission, waiting for loans, waiting for imports, waiting for aid packages, often wrapped in conditions. On that morning, Burkina Faso was sent back a refusal. Sovereignty, it insisted, is not granted by others. It is built in workshops, hammered in laboratories, tested in fields. The moment carried the weight of a climax. One could feel the intensity of contrast. On one side, global giants with trillion-dollar economies. On the other, a country with fewer financial reserves than some Western universities. Yet it was the smaller voice that shook assumptions. That paradox created the drama. Power not measured in dollars, but in determination. The reactions revealed the fault lines of our age. In Western capitals, Washington, Paris, London, the announcement was met not with applause, but with silence, hesitation, even disbelief. Major outlets gave it minimal coverage, framing it as claims rather than breakthroughs. Behind closed doors, policymakers asked a question that carried both curiosity and unease. How did they do it? For them, the implication was unsettling. If a nation with no car plants, no billion-dollar research funds could pioneer in water, defense, and agriculture, what happens when larger African economies follow? Think tanks drafted memos. Some warned of a movement of technological sovereignty spreading across the continent. Others cautioned that aid programs long used as leverage might lose their weight if Africans prove self-reliant. Wall Street analysts muttered about disruption to industries worth hundreds of billions. Water, technology, defense vehicles, agri-tech. Investors asked whether Africa was not simply a resource supplier but a competitor in the making. For the West, the announcement was not only a surprise, it was an inconvenience. Across Africa, however, the atmosphere was electrifying. From Lagos to Nairobi, from Accra to Johannesburg, social media erupted. Hashtags such as Africa can build and Burkina model spread within hours, drawing millions of posts. Students at universities in Ghana and Nigeria began organizing discussions. If Burkina Faso can, why not us? In Kenya, engineering faculties planned hackathons inspired by the agricultural drone. In South Africa, commentators spoke of the psychological emancipation that could prove as important as the inventions themselves. Ordinary citizens felt pride. For once, headlines about Africa were not about conflict, famine, or debt, but about creativity and resilience. Young Africans, long told to seek opportunity abroad, glimpsed another path, building at home. The symbolism was so powerful that even music and art picked it up. Lyrics on radios referenced Burkina attack, while digital creators staged skits of drones planting seeds as metaphors for dignity. At this point, let us pause. Let us take a moment here, not to rush forward, but to give thanks. Write a comment with a simple thank you to Traoré, to Burkina Faso, or to the spirit of sovereignty itself. Gratitude is not a formality. It is recognition. It is dignity expressed in words. When you add your voice of thanks, you are not just engaging with a video. You are standing in solidarity with a story of freedom and pride. So before we continue, take this pause to comment your thank you together. Those words become a beacon that shines far beyond the screen. Back on the ground in Ouagadougou, the reception was equally intense. Crowds cheered not as spectators but as participants, as co-owners of the declaration. Traoré framed the inventions as a philosophy. Solutions made in Africa for Africa by Africans. It was not rhetoric. It was a reversal of centuries of narrative. No longer the passive continent of waiting, but an active continent of creating. Even skeptics could not deny the momentum. Pilot tests of the desalination system were already reducing disease in rural villages. Farmers reported better yields with drone assistance. Soldiers took pride in trucks that rolled silently yet powerfully through rough terrain. These were not hypotheticals. They were lived experiences. And in politics, lived experiences carry a force no press release can match. The global divide sharpened. Western leaders hesitated, wary of legitimizing what they once dismissed. African youth celebrated, eager to claim ownership of destiny. Financial analysts worried about markets. Social movements spoke of sovereignty. The climax was not simply about three machines. It was about three truths: that water is dignity, mobility is independence, and harvest is hope. If gratitude can turn into pride and pride into action, then perhaps a continental movement has already begun. The question is, who will dare to follow Burkina Faso's lead, and who will try to stop it? The true test of invention is not applause in auditoriums, but the quiet changes in daily life. In Burkina Faso, the effects of three machines are already unfolding, not as abstract theories, but as tangible transformations. In the villages where the salt-to-freshwater system has been piloted, mothers no longer walk hours to fetch murky water from distant wells. Children drink without fear of sickness. Local health officials report a significant fall in waterborne disease, leading to fewer hospital visits and more children present in classrooms. For a family, this is not about statistics. It is about time reclaimed, dignity restored, and futures reopened. The agricultural drone, meanwhile, has begun rewriting the script of subsistence farming. In pilot fields, it has increased yields by up to a quarter. For a smallholder who farms 1 or 2 hectares, that increase is not merely extra income. It is the difference between selling surplus at market or facing hunger at harvest. By mapping soil, planting with precision, and monitoring crops, the drone is changing the rhythm of rural life. It allows farmers to replace guesswork with guidance, hope with confidence. The electric military truck carries its own symbolism. To the outside world, it may appear a technical novelty. To young students watching it roll through Ouagadougou, it is a vision, proof that Africa can design machines equal to its challenges. Enrollment in engineering programs has surged. Robotics clubs multiply. Pride fuels ambition, and ambition fuels education. Sovereignty becomes not only political, but generational. The economic consequences extend far beyond borders. By reducing reliance on imported diesel, Burkina Faso saves scarce foreign currency. By generating local solutions, it creates jobs in design, maintenance, and production. By raising agricultural yields, it lowers dependency on costly imports of grain. These savings may appear modest, but in economies measured in billions, not trillions. Every redirected dollar becomes a weapon against dependency. Financial flows, too, are shifting. Members of the African diaspora, managing billions in remittances annually, have begun redirecting funds toward local incubators, technology hubs, and community projects. What was once money for consumption is turning into capital for creation. Wall Street notices. French commentators worry about losing influence. Yet for ordinary citizens, what matters is simple. The future no longer feels imported. It feels earned. Politically, the inventions reshaped the narrative of governance. For decades, leaders in the Global South were judged by how well they negotiated aid or loans. Today, the measure is changing. Leadership is evaluated by capacity to empower domestic solutions. Ibrahim Traore has become a symbol of this shift. His words, "We build because we must," are quoted not only in Burkina Faso, but in classrooms from Dar to Dar es Salaam. Opposition parties, even when critical of his methods, cannot ignore the sense of ownership that the inventions have sparked. This creates new legitimacy. A leader who delivers tangible independence through innovation commands a moral authority deeper than one who signs foreign contracts. It also shifts the balance of negotiation. When governments can demonstrate local capacity, they enter trade talks not as beggars but as peers. Dependency is revealed not as destiny but as a political choice. The implications ripple across Africa. In Ghana, civil society groups push for indigenous water projects. In Nigeria, youth forums demand investment in local defense industries. In Kenya, students rally for government-funded agree. A common question echoes: if Burkina Faso can, why not us? This question, once rhetorical, now feels urgent, yet challenges remain. Scaling production of desalination systems, trucks, and drones requires capital, training, and infrastructure. Political pressure from global corporations whose profits may suffer could intensify. Disinformation campaigns could attempt to undermine public faith in local technology. History reminds us that every step towards independence faces resistance. Still, the cultural impact is undeniable. For centuries, Africa was told to see itself as a market, not a maker. Today, the psychological image is shifting. A continent once defined by raw exports now envisions itself as a laboratory of solutions. That is not propaganda. It is lived experience. And lived experience, when shared widely, becomes identity. This identity is now teaching new lessons in citizenship. Schools discuss inventions as case studies in sovereignty. Universities integrate them into curricula. Communities view themselves not as passive recipients of aid, but as active producers of destiny. It is in many ways a revolution of mindset. And revolutions of mindset often precede revolutions of structure. So the question to you watching this story unfold, do you believe other African leaders can follow his path, or will vested interests at home and abroad attempt to stall the momentum? Comment your thoughts below, because history is not only shaped by leaders, but by voices like yours deciding whether innovation will be celebrated, resisted, or multiplied. If inventions can transform villages and classrooms in one of Africa's poorest nations, what transformations await if entire regions adopt them? What excuse remains for larger economies with deeper resources? The tremors of invention do not stop at national borders. When 3 machines rolled out in Ouagadougou, their echoes reached conference halls in Addis Ababa, boardrooms in New York, and ministries in Paris. The world was compelled to respond, even if some preferred silence. Within the African Union, the tone was cautious yet proud. Delegates praised the achievement as a sign of continental potential. ECOWAS leaders debated whether Burkina Faso's model of self-reliance could be replicated across West Africa. Some urged rapid collaboration, envisioning a network of training hubs and technology incubators. Others, wary of financial costs and political risks, hesitated. Still, the fact that the discussion was no longer about aid but about autonomy marked a turning point. In Europe and the United States, the reaction was mixed. Policymakers in Brussels and Washington expressed polite curiosity, but withheld official endorsement. Privately, think tanks circulated reports warning of technological sovereignty spreading across Africa. If local inventions displaced imported technologies, billions in trade could be at risk. Defense contractors raised alarms. What happens if African armies begin sourcing vehicles from local workshops rather than global suppliers? Agreed corporations asked an equally troubling question. What if small farmers stopped buying expensive imported machinery in favor of the drones designed in Africa? The discomfort was real. A nation often dismissed as peripheral had placed itself at the center of strategic debates. Analysts noted that if Burkina Faso could pioneer the alienation, electric mobility, and a reach than Nigeria, South Africa, or Egypt with far greater resources could transform global supply chains for Western capitals. The announcement was not just inconvenient, it was destabilizing. Other powers saw opportunity. China's state media praised Traoré's vision, framing it as proof of a multipolar world where innovation is no longer monopolized by the West. Russia applauded the defiance of dependency, linking it to its own rhetoric of South-South solidarity. India, seeking to expand its partnerships, offered to share expertise in low-cost production for these nations. Burkina Faso's breakthrough was not a threat, but an invitation, a chance to reconfigure alliances in terms of equality rather than hierarchy. Meanwhile, the African diaspora across Europe and America found in the inventions a source of pride. Student groups organized forums celebrating homegrown innovation. Professionals spoke of investing skills and capital back into the continent. The psychological resonance traveled faster than trade agreements. For once, Africa was not waiting at the margins. It was setting the agenda. Now let us turn this story into a shared moment. Write in the comments where you are watching from. Your city, your country, your corner of the world. Africa continent will read them with gratitude, and we send to each of you a heartfelt wish. May your journey be filled with dignity, hope, and light. This is more than a video. It is a gathering of voices across the globe. Yet questions linger. Will Western governments accept Africa's autonomy or attempt to dilute it through pressure and policy? Can alliances with Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East offer sufficient support to shield African innovation from sabotage? The geopolitical chessboard is shifting, but the pieces are fragile. If global powers struggle to adjust to a new Africa, what storms and opportunities will the future unveil when sovereignty and technology walk hand in hand? Every invention carries within it 2 lives, the prototype that exists today and the path that opens tomorrow. For Burkina Faso, the desalination system, the electric military truck, and the agricultural drone are not endpoints. They are beginnings signposts pointing to a continent's possible future. The road ahead is both promising and perilous. On one side lies the possibility of scaling these innovations into industries that could transform daily life. Imagine a West African network of water purification units built locally, reducing the dependency on expensive projects run by foreign NOSs. Picture electric vehicles designed for rugged terrain, not only serving national armies, but also adapted for civilian use. cutting fuel imports and slashing emissions. Visualize agricultural drones in the hands of millions of farmers, turning fragile subsistence into sustainable surplus. The harvest is visible, the soil is ready, yet on the other side lie challenges. Scaling production requires capital, training, and supply chains that are still fragile. Foreign corporations whose profits are threatened may seek to undermine or discredit African-built technology. Political instability could slow momentum. Even within Africa, vested interests accustomed to imports may resist local alternatives. Necessity gave birth to invention, but perseverance must raise it into permanence. What can be done? Analysts point to regional cooperation as the crucial step. If even 10% of West African nations adopt the Burkinabe model, economies of scale could emerge. Shared training hubs, standardized blueprints, and pooled investment funds could anchor a continental ecosystem. Rather than isolated brilliance, Africa could witness coordinated sovereignty. International alliances will also play a role. Partnerships with nations in Asia or Latin America could provide markets and technical exchange without reproducing colonial dynamics. Diaspora communities sending billions in remittances annually may become a new source of capital, redirecting funds from consumption to creation. Already, small signals suggest this shift is beginning. But the greatest asset lies not in money or machinery, but in mindset. Once the belief takes root that Africans can innovate for Africa, then the harvest of dignity will follow. Seeds planted in Ouagadougou can grow into forests of invention across the continent. The metaphors of soil, seed, and harvest are not romantic flourishes. They are the logic of survival. When necessity is planted with determination, sovereignty becomes the inevitable harvest. Still, a pressing question hovers. Will Africa walk this road together, or will fragmentation stall its steps? Unity has always been both a dream and a difficulty. The inventions of Burkina Faso may offer the catalyst, but the responsibility rests with all. For nations with deeper pockets and larger populations, the excuse of incapacity is gone. What remains is the choice of courage. If one spark in the Sahel can light imaginations across a continent, what storm of innovation awaits when entire nations choose to walk the road of sovereignty side by side? What began as a morning announcement in Ouagadougou has now unfolded into something far larger, a doctrine of independence written in metal, water, and soil. The three inventions, the desalination system, the electric military truck, and the agricultural drone, are not isolated successes. They are statements. They tell the world that the age of waiting is finished, that sovereignty can be engineered, and that dignity is not imported but created. For centuries, the story of Africa was written in other capitals. Reports framed the continent as dependent, as a place where aid dictated progress and where innovation was a borrowed word. Yet today, Burkina Faso has rewritten the page. Out of scarcity, it forged capacity. Out of necessity, it planted sovereignty. Out of silence, it raised a voice that cannot easily be ignored. The message of President Ibrahim Traore is stark and simple. Freedom is not charity, it is a right. These words echo not only through parliaments, but through classrooms, farms, and workshops. When a child drinks clean water from a locally built purification unit, that is sovereignty. When a farmer harvests more grain because a drone guided his seeds, that is sovereignty. When a young engineer dreams of designing machines in Ouagadougou instead of immigrating, that too is sovereignty. Before we close, let us pause. What you have just heard is not simply an episode of history. It is a reminder that sovereignty, dignity, and hope are still alive, waiting to be claimed. If this message has moved you, then subscribe to this channel. Not because we ask for numbers, but because we are building a space where voices of independence are honored and where stories of pride continue to be told. By subscribing, you are not just supporting us, you are choosing to walk with us into the next chapter of Africa's unfolding story. The world is still trembling. In the corridors of power, silence. In the streets of Africa, thunder. Because on that morning in Ouagadougou, a soldier did not merely unveil 3 machines. He declared the rebirth of an idea that sovereignty can be engineered, that freedom is not charity, it is a right. For centuries, Africa's story was written elsewhere, in boardrooms, in parliaments, in languages not its own. Aid was mistaken for compassion, and dependency disguised as partnership. But the sun of August 2025 tore through that illusion. From dust and drought came invention. From scarcity came strength. From silence, a song of defiance. And that song is no longer just Burkina Faso's. It echoes through Accra and Lagos, through Nairobi, Kinshasa, and Johannesburg. You can hear it in the laughter of children drinking clean water, in the hum of electric trucks crossing red soil, in the buzzing wings of drones sowing seeds of survival. Each sound is a syllable of sovereignty, a continent speaking in its own voice again. The world may measure power in GDP, but Africa is measuring it in dignity. Each drop of clean water is a statement. Each drone flight is a sentence. Each electric engine is a chapter in the continent's new book of independence. And yet this is not the end. It is the beginning of a longer march, because the true revolution is not in machines, but in mindsets, in the belief that we no longer wait for the world to save us. We build because we must. We rise because we can. We stand because the soil beneath us still remembers our names. So let this moment not fade into headline. Let it become a movement, a whisper turning into a wave. From every city, every village, every diaspora heart that beats abroad, add your voice. Write in the comments where you stand, because when you speak, you are not just typing words. You are lighting torches. You are saying to the world, Africa will no longer wait for permission. If this story touched, you don't just watch, belong. Subscribe not for numbers, but for pride. Not for algorithm, but for ancestry. When you subscribe, you stand beside those who hammer hope into metal, who turn thirst into invention, who carve tomorrow out of dust. This channel is not a broadcast. It is a gathering of thinkers, builders, dreamers, who believe that the next century can carry an African signature. Together, we are writing it now. The soil has been broken, the seeds have been sown, and from them, harvest will come, not of grain, but of dignity. Not of profit, but of pride. Not of dependency, but of destiny. So the final question is not whether Africa can rise. The question is the world ready when it does? From Ouagadougou to Washington, from the deserts of the Sahel to the towers of New York, the dawn has begun. History is listening, and it sounds like Africa, loud, luminous, and free.